Hello everyone, this is Oskar Lagerosen, the founder of The Total Living, which is an online education startup that provides you with the best and simplest practices, tools, and frameworks to dramatically improve focus, productivity, and results, while at the same time have a calm and anxiety-free life. I publish new articles, new YouTube videos, and new podcast episodes every single day. Now I would like to read out loud the third blog post in the One Glance article series, which are the necessary practices. And let's dive right into it. Because as you remember from the last time, and especially for those who watch this on YouTube, you will probably remember that I left off with a peculiar system in terms of arrows and many different connections and fundamentals, building blocks, etc. And now I'm going to explore and explain what the blue and red arrows mean and the different occasions you have to review this system. Because although you are free to check in on every fundamental whenever you want, these practices constitute the minimum necessary amount to ensure the system's coherence. So this is One Glance during your waking hours, because the essence of the One Glance system is to go from total confusion to total clarity whenever you are awake. In practice, you make use all the time of a buffer system and your calendar. From a piece of paper to a digital document or an assistant if you can afford it, the buffer system functions as your trusted holding bin. Whatever idea, obligation, or updates you have is essential to write it down somewhere that you trust. The popular productivity methodology, getting things done, which it has influenced me a lot, stresses the crucial importance of an in-basket, where you can throw whatever item that needs attention for later review. Although you don't need a physical one specifically, you certainly need a simple place to unload your mind so you can be free from the stress of remembering it. Then we also have the calendar, which is your safety net, your trusted map in which you can turn very quickly towards whenever you get lost and need to get back on the road. The master list, which the calendar really is, with your appointments and tasks, enables you to be in the now, be present, because you trust that you will check it as soon as you need to. However, you have the total freedom to change your calendar and plan if opportunities and unforeseen events show up. Because the calendar, instead of being a prescriptive list of like what you have to do regardless of what happens, I suggest that the calendar should be used as a descriptive list. It should simply reflect your current choice, your current intention, which is why it's so important to update it frequently when needed. Then we also have what is called the entry. And the entry is a process in which you go from nothing to starting a new task. You check the calendar and then find the corresponding task located in the weekly view. The entry must be as easy as possible because of the inertia and doubts of starting another activity. You should be able to have absolutely everything you need right in front of you, prepared in advance before taking a light plunge into the activity. And therefore, we have the corresponding activity, exit, because once you're in, you have to get out at some point, unless you really want to be in, of course, but yeah, you know what I mean. So this is called the exit. During the exit, you update the task or project thoroughly by making a status update and new next actions whenever you need to do them again. Be as detailed as you would explain the current state of your work to your friend, in this case, future you. Then you update the weekly view if needed, and then the calendar. It is applicable if the project requires one less or one more work session than previously expected, and also if the time is a little bit different. And directly after the exit, you look at the calendar for the next activity and prepare yourself as much as possible to jump into the activity when the time comes. So, in other words, the entry has to be as easy as possible to just almost fall into the activity. And the exit has to be as thorough as possible. And this is easier said than done. So that is something that you shouldn't really be taking pity of yourself if you find that you don't get it right the first time, because that's quite a shift. It's almost like once you prep the meal and ate it, that you directly like dish everything, you clean up everything, and then after you make sure that all the different tools and spoons and all that stuff are perfectly ready, and all the food is just there, so you can just like put stuff into wherever it needs to go on the fridge and stuff like that. This is kind of a good analogy to entry here, and exit for that matter. So then we have the daily update, because up until now we've just put a lot of stuff into the buffer. It could be either own ideas, and it could be like email or social media and all that stuff. And at some point, you need to do something about the inputs and obligations and new ideas. And the daily updates, which you can see here, is the time you do it. Because every day, at least every day, you should check your inbox, notifications, and list of new ideas and commitments to clarify what they are about and what needs to be done. You separate the wheat from the chaff, from the important, from the unimportant, and commit to new tasks and projects if you need to. And you can see that there's a yellow, or at least those who are watching the YouTube video can see that there's a yellow circle behind the arrows between the task, projects, and buffer. And this is because it can emphasize, because it's the only time of the day that you do it. The buffer has another component, which is someday maybe list, because you do not necessarily need to decide if you want to move on an idea or cool project if you want to, as long as you reassess the list weekly. And this is classic GTD, the someday maybe list, in which you're like, okay, you have a decide to not to decide system, but you have to review it. So you can still agree with yourself if you still want to keep it some kind of like vague, do you really want to commit and stuff like that. So therefore, the blue arrow symbolizes tasks that are going back to that someday maybe list, which is kind of like a longer buffer. And the red arrow symbolizes the new obligations that comes from your inputs. And also the tasks and projects in themselves should then be even more clarified and specific, using the following questions in order. So the first one, why am I doing it? Because often it's just so easy to add one more thing without being like mindful of its importance. But if you know why, then you can avoid just putting stuff there, because it's easier that way, and you don't need to write it. The second question is, when is the last possible time to be finished? Because if it's during one day of the current week, you put the task and project below that day in weekly view. And if it's a project, you also put it earlier, the deadline, if it requires more work sessions, which is kind of like the definition of project, that it requires more work session than just one. Otherwise, it will be a task. And this is all if it has to be done this week. But on the next week, then you put it into the longer view in the corresponding week. Because if you're putting it in the longer view, you don't need to proceed anymore with the questions, because you're going back to it in the future. And then we have a question which I didn't put in the blog post, but later on I found out that that's actually quite an important one, to separate tasks and projects. So the question is, will just one work session finish this? And if it's not, then it's a project. And projects require a little bit of a special care, which I will dive deeper in future videos and episodes. Then we have the fourth question, which is, what is the desired outcome? That is, if that activity was wildly successful, how it look like exactly. Because unless absolutely obvious, you should write it down to yourself, being as specific as possible. This is because only then you can come up with the next step. And the next step is, what is the next physical actions that you need to do in order to move it forward? I need to write them specifically as well, as you would instruct a friend or even stranger. They have to be that kind of details, because when you're doing something else and want to get back to the task, you do not want to think about, oh, where was I, and all that stuff. You want as little friction as possible here. And later videos and episodes go deeper into these questions and provide many examples. So do not worry if it sounds completely foreign at the moment, because practice makes perfect after all. This is kind of a art, a skill, so to speak. And after clearing up your buffers and updating your tasks and projects, you're then ready to time block the next day on your calendar based on what your weekly view says. You can group small tasks in one session and dedicate time to harder tasks or tasks that just take longer time and attention. As previously said about the calendar, it is a forecast and not a prophecy. So do not worry about being perfect here, because you can always adjust it later if you need to. And until the next video and episode has been released about time blocking and the calendars in general, I'm going to link in the show notes and the description a very good video published by the best-selling productivity and technology author Cal Newport, one of very big influencer to me, about the practice of time blocking. But you don't need an external planner to do it unless you want to, of course. After time blocking the next day, you're finished with a daily review. And you should pat yourself on the back, because you're very good. You're very advanced by doing this. It's kind of like a master key to effective living. And how cool is that? I mean, this is kind of like the solution to everything, really. And with practice, the daily update is very streamlined. Thus, if it looks too overwhelming, later blog posts will deepen the understanding of the daily update. Then we have what is called project completion, because I mentioned that each task and project in the previous video and episode, they correspond to your goals or areas. And this means in practice that you should, at least once a week, update your goals and areas and also see where tasks and projects are completed, because it's more often the projects that require some check-in, because the tasks are more temporary than that. And you basically take the time, like once a week or even more frequent or so, to check in, like how is it been going, like the tasks and projects are moving as well, and you can remove projects from the goals and area page and stuff like that in order to make it more current. But you decide how often you want to do it, but at least once a week in order to not have it drift apart, so to speak. And you can also choose, once again, not to complete a task or project due to various reasons. And if so, you can either trash it, or you can move it to the buffer, to the someday maybe list. And once again, it's beneficial if the goals and areas are updated there, but you can also do it on a weekly basis. Speaking of weekly, then we have what's called weekly updates. And in many other methodologies called like the weekly review and weekly plan, but I call this a weekly update in order to get it more fit into the system. Because as you can see, the weekly update is only evolving more than the daily update. Because you can see here, if you're watching the YouTube video, the green text above, goals, areas, and longer view. But other than that, it's just like the same arrows flowing, because the weekly update consists of a normal daily update, but it also includes a check-in on your longer view and the someday maybe list. So that's actually the reason why you want to do the weekly weekly update in order to check the longer view and make sure that it's been queued to the weekly view. So think about the weekly update as just a longer daily update. In other words, not really as extra fancy or so, although it's quite a sophisticated practice overall. And you should do the weekly update on a certain day of the week. As of now, I'm doing mine on Saturday morning, but you can do it whenever it feels best for you. And the weekly updates function like a daily update. You clear up your inboxes and clarify tasks and projects, and then after you add the tasks and projects from longer view to the new weekly view, you build up a new weekly view basically based on the informed actions from your deepest intentions, and then you distribute them by the due dates. You also check your Sunday maybe list and add one of these entries if you feel like you need or want to. And after that, time block as usual, and you're good to go. Last but not least, we have the longer updates. Once the current quarter, a semester, or whatever you want to have in terms of long time span within a year, you should plan out the next couple of weeks ahead. And this is when you visit the goals, areas, and vision you dream to ensure that essential actions get done, such as very meaningful but non-urgent and long-term work. The longer update is an extended weekly update. So we got daily, and then after we got the weekly, and then longer update, in which you list the upcoming weeks and add projects and due dates in advance. But just like the weather forecast, you can't really predict, like if you're in January and you want to see like April's weather, it's not too much to see like in the end. So expect the longer view to be more filled over time. It can be a lot of blanks. It's perfectly fine, because as time moves on, you will discover when you're closer to a week what's the best thing to do. So all of these reviews that are covered represent the minimum necessary amounts to live your life with maximum output, clarity, and happiness. However, you can visit all the fundamentals as often as you want if you feel there is some adjustment or to just experience the awe of your life. And like one click, the different review schedules are the invisible processes behind the sheer power of just one simple glance. And from entry and exit to the longer updates, these review schedules build upon each other like layers, all embedded within themselves. The system is opportunistic and dynamic because you just update the fundamentals whenever needed, thus preserving self-organization and just-in-time adjustments. You start from the bottom practice and gradually incorporate more practices with many benefits for each stage. In the next video and the next episode, I will examine the necessary tools for one glance. If you like this video, if you like this episode, and wish that your friends could live a stress-free and productive life as well, please share it. And also please subscribe on the newsletter, which you can find at thetotalliving.com. And also subscribe to the channel and to the podcast. And with that, I wish you a very nice day, and we'll see you next time.